Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, and before the Bills kick things off for the 2023 regular season, I wanted to bring my friends back in for another supersized season preview podcast because the one that primed up things before the offseason was so successful. We had a great conversation. So once again, I have from ESPN, Alaina Getzenberg, from Syracuse.com, Matt Parrino, I'm from WGR 550, Sal Capaccio, friends. Thank you for coming to the table once again with me. We're going to dive into expectations for the Bills this upcoming season on more of an overarching type of topics of Sean McDermott, Ken Dorsey, the pressure on the potential coordinators here, how the offense looks, how the defense looks, and, of course, at the end, we will hit some bold predictions because I know one guy here is chomping at the bit to gloat a little bit because theirs came true after the last time we did one of these.
Wow.
So I'd like to get into things and start here with it's a different feel, frankly, for the Bills heading into this season than we were a year ago. They were the preeminent Super Bowl favorites largely by everyone you would ask. This year it's not the case. Alaina, is it better for this team to be the hunter rather than being the hunted as they were a year ago?
Yes, I think so. Especially because, if you've paid much attention to Sean McDermott over the years, that kind of fuel, he loves that stuff. And, I don't think it's a bad thing to not be, the number one, the top team, the Chiefs, the Bengals. I think it's okay to be considered where they are. And in some ways, it kind of takes that extra pressure off their back. But, they say they don't listen to that stuff, which is fine. They can say that and whatever. But I do think it adds bulletin board material to be like, no, look, everyone's not doubting us and all that. And I think whether that actually helps them on the field, I don't know. But from a morale and you could use it as fuel to it's not going unnoticed for sure.
Matt, are they underlooked? Are they being under-talked about going into this season?
Yes. But to Alaina's point, that's what they want. And I also think that this year is the year to be underlooked or underappreciated because it is such a competitive AFC. And so last year, the Bills were at the top of the heap. There was a bunch of really good teams at the top. But now the Jets kind of entered the mix. I think year two of the Tyreek Hill-led Miami Dolphins are going to be, I think you can make an argument that they're undersold a little bit, even in their own division. I think they're the second best team in the division, and we could probably get into some of that later in the show. But I think the Bills are exactly where they want to be. They're going to have tons of national headlines to hang up in the locker room because nobody believes in them. It's a weekly kind of succession plan. It's like Stephon Diggs drama, Sean McDermott on the hot seat. Has Josh Allen regressed? That's like a weekly series on the national scene. And I think they love that because you could kind of come into this now. The expectations, what are they for Monday Night Football against the Jets in the first month of the season, which I don't think the Bills have a particularly tough start to their season. I think you can kind of get into this thing and kind of see how it develops.
Sal, pressure is a weird place for this team. Is there pressure for them because their arrow is no longer rising with two exits in the divisional round in a row? Or is there not pressure because nobody seems to be thinking they're on the same level or talking about the expectations the same way they are the Chiefs and the Bengals and the New York Jets and on and on?
Well, I think there's a ton of pressure internally within their own building. They know that they've come close. They haven't gotten to their ultimate goal. Look no further than the field house. We walk in there. There is this huge banner which stretches a 53 and a third yard at least because that's the width of a football field. And it's a huge Lombardi trophy. And it says one team, one goal. When you put that up there, you're putting the pressure on yourself to go out and accomplish that ultimate goal. So I think there's a lot of pressure there. And quite frankly, there's pressure from the fan base. The fan base is itchy. They if they don't win this year, they want changes in some way. We know that Terry Pegula, Kim Pegula aren't going to fire Sean McDermott or Brandon Beane. That's not going to happen. But there seems to be this ceiling that a lot of the fan base thinks that maybe they've hit, and if you can't do it, well, then you got to make some changes. So I think there's pressure like that. I don't think the organization is going to react to that pressure, but I think they have it on themselves for sure. And to your point about they're in a different spot, I agree completely. For me, the fascinating question is why. Not even if it should be, it's just why do people view them that way? And I guess it's just what happens when you run your course of a few years. and everybody wants something a little bit new in the national media, and Aaron Rodgers is new, and the Dolphins are looking like they're looking. So, Bills, Super Bowl window closing, all that kind of stuff. So I think the why we've gotten here has been pretty fascinating to me.
You talk about national takes and all of these people saying things about the Bills, what they are, what they are not. You've served this narrative throughout the offseason, the lull of the offseason of their window, and talks of where this organization and team is in a specific Super Bowl window. Sal, I'll just start back with you because you brought it up. Where are the Bills in this window, and is that where the pressure lands most heavy because it potentially is not as open or could be closing if this isn't the year?
This roster's window is closing. I mean, they're getting older. They're aging out. Heck, Josh Allen said that to us, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
During, OTAs or minicamp. He said, we want to win for Micah and Jordan and Stephon Diggs. These guys are getting older. We all know that. We're all not going to be here, forever together. The organization's window is certainly not closing. As long as you have 17 under center, the parts are going to change, but you'll always have a look at it. I think about teams like Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, where sometimes they were pretty good on defense, sometimes they weren't, sometimes he had a better running game, sometimes he didn't, but they still had Aaron Rodgers, so they always contended whether they got to a certain level or not. So I think a lot of this talk about Super Bowl window closing, no, but on these specific players on this team right now, there's going to be changes over the next year or so. So that certainly is. But this team is going to contend for a Super Bowl as long as Josh Allen is the quarterback.
What do you think about the window topic?
So let me pivot off of that a little bit and say I don't know that Sean McDermott's approval rating amongst fans has ever been lower going into the season. I don't know if that's like bold to say, but I have never gotten a sense amongst fans that there's this level of dissatisfaction with the head coach. And it doesn't feel like it's the same towards Brandon Beane. It feels like it's Sean McDermott. And in a way, I almost feel like Sean McDermott has answered that, if he feels it at all, and I can't speak for him, but with taking ownership of all of it. Like, the defense is going to be specifically on him to figure this out. If this defense doesn't look like it has the last couple of years, like, those questions in the press conferences over the course of the season are going to get really uncomfortable. And I feel like the noise around Sean McDermott in his place, like, I don't think he's on the hot seat. I don't think anything could really happen this year where he could get fired. But I do think that, like, it creates an uncomfortable temperature within the organization if the head coach, if there's this grand lack of belief in his ability to win, and if they don't capitalize this year in the window that you're talking about, that only grows.
It's funny because I'm looking at my rundown. And, Alaina, if you want to touch on the window, you certainly can. But next bullet point for me was Sean McDermott, the importance of 2023. Have your hat, Alaina, at either topic or both.
I think they're related to what both of them said, actually. I actually really agree with the way Sal put that. I think the window on this group is it's coming to an extent. I mean, you look at that defensive backfield, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, they're not going to be Bills for years and years to come. That's just, I mean, Jordan almost wasn't this year. Like, that's just the reality of it. This team's not going to be able to look the same cap-wise. They're not going to be able to look the same. There's just a bunch of reasons why. And then I think you go to the window talk of, has this team prepared itself for their departure? Has the draft gone well enough? Had they built enough young players up to when Micah, Jordan, Von Miller's 34 years old, when these guys leave, what does this roster look like? That's, to me, the window question, because whenever Josh Allen is on the field, their window's open, right? Like, I think that's just what it is. He's that good, and he can do that much. But it's what this roster looks like after these older guys leave that's the big question. And then to your point about Sean, I think it's a big season for Sean McDermott. I mean, it's let alone the defensive coordinator part of it. Like, I think we don't talk about that enough. The fact that he's added another, I know he was very involved in the defense, and of course, to say he didn't have a hand previous years is incorrect and ignorant, but he's adding another responsibility on game days, and I think that's a big deal. And what that looks like and how he does in that role makes this a big year, because not only did should this Bills team be successful this season, and if they're not, something goes wrong, and that's on him because he's the head coach, but he's also added extra responsibility. So yeah, I think it is a really big season for him. I don't think he's not going anywhere, but like, at least right now, and like, but I do think if this doesn't go well, that, to Parrino's point, like, the talk and the fire, like, that only grows significantly.
He's been insulated whether rightfully or not, a little bit by Leslie Frazier, because Leslie Frazier, by title and by play calling, was the defensive coordinator. When things go really bad against Cincinnati, it was a collective effort, but the defense, the blame falls on Leslie Frazier. 13 seconds or not being able to stop Kansas City earlier, that falls on Leslie Frazier. Yeah, Sean took heat, certainly, and still is, because of the way that game ended. But now that's been stripped away by his own doing of sorts, as now he has taken it away to where if the team overall doesn't succeed up to expectations, it's on McDermott. And if the defense is part of that reason or the biggest part of it, then it's like a double whammy for him. Let's talk defense, Sal. What do you expect to be different with the Bills' defense with Sean McDermott in the play-calling seat?
I think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. How that manifests itself, I'm not really sure. Does that mean more blitzing? Maybe. Does that mean more man-to-man coverage? Maybe. There's a lot of ways to be aggressive. People think aggressive football has to be blitz, 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 and come from all the different angles. They might do a little bit of that. I find it interesting that when they lost Tremaine Edmonds, and look, they had to make a decision. They have to start, as to Alaina's point, you have to start preparing yourself in a certain way, right? You can't pay everybody. So that was a decision. They knew that, that was a little too pricey for them. How did they replace him? They didn't draft a first-round pick. They didn't go out and get a free agent, with a little less money. They're using these younger players who are kind of like hybrid type of players against the run, against the pass. I think that's a clue that Sean McDermott wants to be more of a matchup defense and figure out, okay, what you're doing on offense is how I'm going to match up on defense, and I can have all these different pieces. Taylor Rapp comes into play here, right? What do we see? Look, Taron Johnson's a great nickel corner. I think he's one of the best in the league. Maybe we see, okay, in certain times he's a little bit undersized. Do they go with more three linebacker looks? Because we have these matchup guys who can do these things. To me, that's aggressive. To me, I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive in how I dictate how to play you and what I'm going to force you to do against me. So that's what I think. Initially, I thought, are we going to see more dime, more three safety look? Are we going to see more big nickel? Maybe. But I think he likes his roster enough where he doesn't have to do all that, and maybe we're just going to see some wrinkles here and there about how they approach a down-to-down basis.
Matt, how much do they need to be different?
They need to be different. I'm concerned that they won't be very different, and I wonder if that goes back to your point, and that maybe this wasn't Leslie Frazier's defense all these years, and it was Sean's. Like the second preseason game, I thought it was like watching a rerun, and Tre'Davious White on a 3rd and 7 was like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, and I can't remember who the receiver, maybe it was Pickens or whoever, gave him like this huge cushion on a 3rd and 7, and he ends up getting 9 yards for a first down. I'm like, wasn't that kind of like supposed to be the stuff that they get out of this defense? Like that to me is where the opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive in situational places. Like you don't have to completely flip to man-to-man defense. They're never going to do that. They probably don't even have the personnel to do that, right? So, they kind of do in their first-round draft pick cornerback from last year, but that's a whole nother topic, and we can talk about that later. Heaven forbid they kind of move into that look. And by the way, listen, I think we're on the path to not having Kyer Elam start. Like, I think we could probably all agree on that. Maybe somebody's got a bold take there.
On the path?
Right. Next week. Like,
no, we're there. He's
right.
not starting.
I don't know. I think that something could happen over the course of the practice week or somebody might say something within the building that says, hey, why
okay,
don't
then
you get
I
the
have a
first round
bold
pick?
take.
Anyway, if he's not out there, like, you're going to have to, at some point this season, in my opinion, and maybe this is wrong, figure out a way to get him on the field and put him in a position to have success, even if that's not your defense, because here's another piece. What if they roll this out with Benford and Jackson, and maybe they rotate them at that spot, and the defense isn't the same unit that we've seen, and they're getting gashed in the passing game, and now they have to reimagine what it looks like. Like, that to me is kind of like an under-the-radar storyline. What happens if they get into the season and things aren't going well? How do they pivot? Like, do they go more 6 DBs? Do they go to a 3-linebacker look, which I think they can do anyway? There's a history there. They did it with Lorenzo Alexander. I think playing 90% nickel is allowing the offense to scheme against you, always knowing what your personnel is going to be out there, and then you just run all these different variations of your offense against that, knowing nothing's going to change on the other side.
But they've done that for how many years in their top 5 defense, pretty much
regular season,
right?
Regular
sure,
season.
and I think then it comes down to the playoffs and maybe making some adjustments against high-powered offenses and better teams. But this defense has been this defense it's very hard to maintain that level of defensive play for that many years. And the Bills have done that. And I think that's because So the one thing I'm actually super excited for the Sean McDermott defense to see, because I think for him to put this pressure on himself and owning it, as you say, which is right, I think is really cool. But honestly, like the one thing I've never, ever wavered from or thought differently about, I think Sean McDermott's a heck of a defensive coach. I really do. I just think he has a great defensive mind, and I think he's adaptable. So that stuff's not going to, unless something just says, wait, man, you are being stubborn. I don't see that. Maybe they were the last few years under Leslie Frazier, and that's why he's gone. Maybe Sean said, look, I with all due respect, I got to start being more adaptable, and that's why I'm doing this. So I wonder how it looks. And if we get to that point and they don't, and teams are doing that, then we're going to have a conversation. I'm confident that he's going to be able to do that based on just what we've seen from him in the past.
Alaina, I'll give you the last word on Sean McDermott.
I somewhat agree with what they were saying. I mean, I do think that, like, it will look different, but I don't think it's going to look that. I think it's kind of what you were saying, like, how different will it look? Because I think he's had such a heavy hand on this defense the past few years. But I just, to your point, though, I don't think you could take Taron Johnson off the field. It's part of the problem. Like, why you play so much nickel. Because you could argue he's better than their three options opposite Trey in terms of the talent level you want on the football field. So, I don't know. I think they need it to look different because of the struggles in the postseason, but it's worked as well. Like, they're one of the best pass defense if you look at, like, the last, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but they're among the best pass defense over the last however many years, and it's working. So, yeah. I mean, I do think it'll look different, but I really do think, like, the thing I think is important to stress, it's not going to look radical. It's still,
agreed.
It's not going to look radically different.
You're right in that it has worked. Like, you both are right in that hasn't worked. Like, there's been games, even in the regular season, against really elite offenses. Like, the Kansas City game last year is a perfect example where their version of this defense worked in that game. And what was the common thing there? They had Von Miller, right? So, I mean, that's what they're hoping eventually this becomes, and they get him back close to what he was last year. And I think that kind of, like, makes it okay to struggle at times in the secondary if your defensive line can be elite like it was at times last year.
That's a big if, though, to just add to that even when Von Miller is back on the football field, the 34-year-old Von Miller coming off his second ACL of his life is going to be the guy he was at the start of last season. Like, that just is, if we learned anything with watching Trey go through, obviously they're different situations, but the idea that he's going to be, like, the guy from the jump to me is a problem.
John, are you betting on him?
We will get to the defensive line conversation
sorry.
a little later.
We're trying to
no.
We got excited.
Because there's not a different play caller on offense, but there is a huge call for a different way the offense operates under Ken Dorsey in his second season. Matt, we'll start with you here on this one. We'll go right down the middle here. What are your expectations, and what do you need to see from this Bills offense under Ken Dorsey in year two?
Variety and a more nuanced approach to play calling. Like, Isaiah McKenzie was on with Tyler Dunn in the offseason, and I thought that was, like, one of the most important quotes of the offseason, that, like, Ken Dorsey is just as aggressive as anybody in that offense. And so, like, to his detriment at times. Like,
saying that Isaiah said that?
Isaiah said that about Ken. He's like a gunslinger. He, like, attacks down the field. And he actually attributed Gabe Davis's lack of a route tree last year to the fact that Dorsey just wanted to work him down the field and send him on go routes. And, like, you could kind of get that sense from talking to Gabe Davis, too. So I think what they did is they gave him a variety of players to now have a more variety of styles in terms of pass catchers. And then, oh, by the way, in the backfield, it's not just going to be this passive, like, in between the tackles, can bounce it outside. You have some physicality in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, who I think fit what they want to do a little bit better. And then you have James Cook, who could kind of do things in the run game and the pass game. I just think it's more variety.
Sal?
A better counterpunch. I thought the second half of the year, we all saw it. With our naked eye, we could tell the offense wasn't the same, right? Really, since the second half of the Packers game. Josh gets hurt. Obviously, that's a part of it, right? He hurts his elbow in the next week against the Jets. But it just felt like it was a struggle the second half of the year for them to do what they normally would do. Yet, that being said, they were still scoring a lot of points. I think the reason for that is, to me, you had a first-year offensive coordinator. Teams got film on what they were doing. They started to kind of scheme a little better against it and say, okay, this is what we know what the Bills are doing. And I don't think Ken Dorsey quite had been equipped enough to have seen all of that in his career yet to figure out how to counterpunch that. To me, you got to have a better counterpunch. that comes with personnel. Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield. Guys, I mean, we all know. Why did they go out and draft Dalton Kincaid? They have missed the middle of the field Cole Beasley outlet pass. The easy button, bam, I can just do that. That's part of the counterpunch. But to me, that's what I want to see. I want to see when teams figure you out a little bit, how then do you go, okay, that's fine. We have a different answer.
Alaina, if it doesn't look different, if the results aren't the same, is Ken Dorsey calling plays this second season to save his job?
To save his job. I don't know if we're quite there. I think it's a conversation. Like, I don't think you go, okay, if it doesn't work this year, he's immediately fired. I do think you start to get to that point, though. I mean, with the weapons that they brought in, to Parrino's point, if they don't use them a certain way, like if they don't integrate and like get creative with the offense with the guys they have, that's a problem. Because why did you bring all these guys in then? Just to, I mean, whatever happened with Nyheim Hines getting 11 touches to end last season, and for whatever reason that was, you got to work with these guys. See if you can create things, get creative. Like, you have this talent, try to use it in different ways. Like, I think that if that doesn't happen, that's a problem. And to me, the yak conversation that, like, these top offenses have guys who can get yards after catch. And for the past couple of years, we've heard the Bills say, oh, we want to do that. We want to have that be part of the offense. And last year it did not happen. It just didn't work. And with the guys they've brought in, that's part of protecting Josh Allen, too. If he gets the ball out quicker, gets it to other guys, have it out of his hands, then he's healthier. So to me, that's like the biggest thing. They need to do that. And if that doesn't work with the guys they brought in, then we're starting to have that conversation.
Matt, the importance of this season and the production and the look of things for Ken Dorsey's tenure as this team's OC.
I think it's kind of, it runs in line with Sean in a way. Like, if the offense struggles, how much of that is Sean's responsibility because of how much time he's spending on the defense? How do we know if him, like, he's always had a role in the, even going back to when Brian Dable was here, in like who they are as an offense philosophically. Remember a couple years ago when the run game wasn't working and he says, I don't know if we can fix the run game. You do that in training camp.
Mm-hmm.
And they were struggling throughout the season. It's almost like he put it then on the offense to like figure it out. Ken Dorsey is not Brian Dable. Like, this is his first job. Like, I almost feel like if you're Sean McDermott, you almost have to treat him in a way with kid gloves because he is a very young coordinator learning lessons that he's going to learn lessons this year based on how things work and how he adapts to certain things. So, I don't know. I just don't know how we could get to a place unless this offense just takes a complete step back to where he's going to get fired, unless it's just none of the buttons that he's pushing is working, and he's losing people in the locker room. Like right now, Stephon Diggs came out and supported Ken Dorsey. That might be like just words, right? Like that must be like, to paint a picture and like everything's fine. But where does the frustration truly lie in what went wrong last year, and does that kind of rear its head this season, and how much of that is Dorsey? Because there's fans that'll tell you and argue that it was Dorsey who everybody was upset with down the stretch last year. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, and nobody's going to tell us inside the building what the case was, obviously, but that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch.
That's
Sal,
also, can I say really quick, if Josh Allen likes Ken Dorsey and thinks it's working, that's big for Ken Dorsey's job security.
And I was going to mention Josh Allen, the biggest advocate for Ken Dorsey over these past few seasons. And Sal, so much focus and weight is on Ken Dorsey for the offense to look a certain way. How about the overall pressure for Josh Allen entering this season? He's on the cover of Madden. He's in more national commercials. He's ascended into this conversation with Patrick Mahomes and other quarterbacks, but he hasn't gone as far as some of these other quarterbacks. He's never made a Super Bowl. He's never won an MVP, and now you kind of see him rising to a stature, and does he have to meet that with the level and success of not only himself but this team this season?
Well, look, the quarterback position is unlike any other position really in all of sports, right? This is about Lombardi trophies for the quarterback. That's what it's about. Simple as that. At some point, he needs to do that if he wants to ever be considered truly among the upper echelon of people who've played this game. We all see the talent. His talent is undeniable. His talent already puts him in the stratosphere of people who've ever played professional football. But we do this. I grew up in the era of Jim Kelly, Dan Marino, Boomer Esiason, and guys who never won one. Dan Fouts. I mean, these are the greatest passers, greatest players ever played. But they always have the but ... attached to their name. I think he has to have that for that but ... to be removed from his name. Look, the closer we are to it, we see it every day. We go to practice and go, oh, my God, what a throw that guy just made, right? We see it. We know that fans nationally, Madden, all the people that play him, all these things are coming to him. But now you have all of these great quarterbacks in the AFC. And the longer it goes that Josh Allen doesn't win a Lombardi, the further we'll get away from people considering him to be with a Mahomes, with a Burrow, if they already do or if they don't. The minute he wins one, he's a made man. 10 years can go by, and you're always going to be talked about as someone of the greatest in the game. That's just what we do with quarterbacks. I don't think it's fair. It's just how it works.
Also, Josh Allen's one Super Bowl will be, in this town at least, equal to maybe Brady's. Because
No.
there is a history in this city with failure in the big games. To this moment. Like, we have it in this era of Bills football. Like, that one Super Bowl will mean so much for generations that I just, like, to your point, he's a made man. Like, he could literally regress every year for the rest of his career.
Wouldn't matter.
It won't matter.
Wouldn't matter.
Well, people talk about, and this is a Homer thing, LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
It was a historic comeback when
Yeah.
they beat the Warriors, but the weight of winning a
Yes.
championship in the city of Cleveland, one that had not won one in 50, 60 years, is a very similar relationship to if Josh Allen or whoever with the Buffalo Bills ends the championship drought here in the city of Buffalo. LeBron's won 4, but it's like 4.5, 4 3/4, because a lot of people look at the one not only for coming back from 3-1 down, but because it was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, they look at it in a different light. Alaina, where do you sit in terms of the true pressure on Josh Allen entering this season?
That is fair, though, because I think you were talking from, like, a national perspective. I think one Super Bowl has a different meaning, but locally, like, yeah, it would. Yeah, wow.
City would burn
That would
down.
be, yeah, it would be
Right.
something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've actually. The pressure on Josh is interesting. I think he feels it's. He talks about it a lot, so I do think he must feel that pressure. It's not on him to me though. Like it's on him to an extent, but like it's spread throughout. This team needs to win a Super Bowl because of how good they've been for this amount of time and where they are. Like we talked about with this current group is not going to be together for much longer. So I think that's more where it is.
It's funny. I always think about Aaron Rodgers, and you mentioned it, Sal. He's maybe the poster child of this. He's a multiple-time MVP. He is considered one of the arguably the most talented quarterbacks in the history of the game. He's won one Super Bowl, and people completely seem to forget about that fact because it happened early in his career, and he doesn't even get there. Green Bay was always great. You talk about windows. Green Bay was always in the driver's seat, always was one of the contenders, and with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, they won one Super Bowl, and I think it illustrates your point of you win one, it masks a lot of things, but I think it also illustrates the point of just because you have an incredibly transcendent quarterback as your talented guy under center, that does not guarantee that the results from a team are going to come.
This is a great conversation of the hyperbolic nature of sports fans in general, because like you just mentioned that, like Aaron Rodgers was the guy when he won that Super Bowl, and people were talking about him even from that moment on as the greatest to ever do it, over Tom Brady, even over Peyton Manning. Some
saying he'll win 3, 4,
not even
whatever.
that, just like his place in the game and the history of the game. Like Patrick Mahomes, I know this is like crazy to even suggest. He's got 2 Super Bowls. What if he never wins another one? Like, what if he somehow regresses? What if Travis Kelce somehow he regresses? He's getting older. Chris Jones is not around. Like, what happens if like they never go back to a Super Bowl? How does that change the conversation on Patrick Mahomes in 10 years from now? It's just, I bring that up only in the sense that we can't really write the story until the story's done.
Yep.
Like, there's so much more. This is the first iteration of Josh Allen's Buffalo Bills career. We're still in it. Like, Sean McDermott, this team, like Stephon Diggs, like that's all part of like the first chapter, I think. And it may be a 2-chapter book. Like, you don't know how long this thing goes. Maybe it'll be 3, maybe it'll be 4. But I think to go too far into the big grand picture is foolish.
But by the way, to your point on that, I mean, I brought up Marino and Kelly and those guys. The other guy was Elway, right? And it took Elway until he was mid to late 30s to actually win one.
He won 2, right?
We thought the story was written on John Elway. That class never win. He was the yeah but guy. Yeah but always lost in the AFC Championship. Always lost in the Super Bowl. And then he finally won one. So you're right. Unfortunately, though, we live in a here and now world where you need the instant takes and satisfaction and analysis.
Let's go to the offense as a whole.
This is part of my bold prediction, though. We'll save this for later in the show.
Oh, all right. Settle down there, buddy. Your hair's doing fine. Let's talk about the offense. Alaina, I want to get your expectations for Gabe Davis. It seems as we've gone through the offseason, it's really been hammered home. The ankle injury was a larger deal than they made of last year and maybe we made of. And now all of a sudden, as he's going into a contract year and they didn't make a bold move at the number 2 wide receiver, it's all coming to the forefront that, no, that really was the reason Gabe Davis didn't take off like people wanted. But I always say this, it's not like Gabe Davis was horrible. Everyone's talking about a breakout or a bounce-back season. The dude had over 800 yards receiving. It didn't live up to the hype or what the expectations were, but is he going to be the true number 2 that people thought that they should have extended themselves this offseason to get?
I don't know. Like, I think that's where we are with it. He has never been. Last year, the ankle obviously played a role, but there were other reasons too. Like, it was not just the ankle. Like someone talked about earlier, they were sending him down 50 yards downfield and like trying to get him involved that way, and it didn't work. So
I think the average depth of target he's had was like the highest in the league.
Yeah.
Like, you're running down the field, it's a harder pass to complete, right?
Yeah, so naturally his target and reception percentage is going to be bad because they were sending him on these routes that it was just too much. But I don't think we've seen from Gabe Davis consistently enough that he can be that true number 2 receiver, which is why I wouldn't pay him at this time. But I'm not Brandon Beane. So, yeah, I think we need to see a larger sample size from him that we just have not had to prove that he can be that number 2 receiver to complement Steph in the way that they would like him to. And to me, like, he's got to go show it. Like, I think he's looked good in camp and there's lots of potential, but like, to me, it's like at this point he has to go actually do that in games on a football field consistently over the course of a season.
I think I'm not ruling out them extending Gabe Davis even still like this week or like early in the season. Like, I think it's something they probably want to do, but I think if you're Brandon Beane, you know, they've modeled so much of, I shouldn't say modeled, but they've studied the Kansas City build. And I think like the way that they've built around Mahomes there, like paying one guy and then just fitting in a bunch of other pieces that can change year over year, like that kind of works against a Gabe Davis extension, because if he's out there asking for like 18 a year, which to be fair, like there's some number 2 receivers that are getting that, like Chris Godwin and Mike Williams, like they're really good receivers, but I don't know if their production is definitely or has necessarily equaled that kind of compensation, but that's kind of the going rate. And I think Gabe Davis is better than that Jacoby Myers, like 11, 12 million per season, but can you find a happy medium? And I just think if you're Brandon Beane, you're probably sitting back and saying, I'm not going to rush to this, because maybe it's a Matt Milano situation where you run it all the way down to the goal line and you say, and he gets some other offers out there and it's not as big as he thought, or maybe it is, but he doesn't want to leave the environment that he's got here. I'm big on Gabe Davis. Like I'm a fan from the perspective of what I think he can be in this offense and what he can do. And I do agree with Brandon. Like, we all see it. The dude the work ethic is off the charts. Like, I don't think it's for show how much extra time that he puts in. Like, if you did it one off 1 week, or it's consistently every week, the guy is on the jugs machine. He seems to be so determined to get better. And so from that perspective, I think he could have a big season.
I was just going to say quickly to add on that, how many guys can you sign because of what they can be? Like, they signed Ed because they think they see what he can do, what his future is.
At the price point, too.
At the price point, right. But what's the price point with Gabe? Like, I think how many guys can you sign to these long-term deals and be like, okay, the price is good, it works, and we see a certain projection of what he could do. I just think it's unknown.
Can I say something on Gabe here? It was my bold prediction on our last pod that they would sign him to an extension before the season. I have 6 days still to be right, by the way. Although it doesn't appear that's going to happen. I do think it's still very tricky. Everything both of you are saying is right. I want to remind everybody a couple things. Number one, to your point about working, he has won the Lifter of the Year 2 years in a row for this team. This guy is a tireless worker. It is not for show. It is right. He actually opened up a gym with his trainer in Florida for other NFL players, prospects to come in. Like, they work with all of these guys. Like, they're all about the mind and the body and getting it right. He was just named a team captain by his own teammates on a rookie deal, which is not very usual, by the way. He's 24 years old. The Bills talk so much glowingly about him, and all of these things. Does he not scream Bills DNA? So this is why I say it's tricky. Everybody pays attention to who you pay. All of these things add up to everybody in the locker room is probably saying, like, that's the guy you got to pay. Like, look at, this is the guy we want with us every single week in our locker room. So even if you don't think the price point necessarily matches, I think Brandon Beane has to consider that because of what he means to the rest of the room who's looking at who you pay and who you don't pay.
But I also do think I think all of that I think is important to consider, important to point out. But I do think they're making some, like the conversation we had earlier about this roster's aging out to some of it is aging out. You really have to make careful choices with who you're paying at this point because you're only paying so many guys from this group. So
which is why they let Tremaine walk.
Exactly. So it's just
it's tough.
He's a locker room guy for sure. Like he's got these qualities that like there's guys that clearly really like him and see what he's doing and putting the work in that is important.
Let's have the Dalton Kincaid conversation. It's one that I know everyone at this table has had for months, ever since he was drafted. The hype was high because of what we saw at training camp, what others saw in games and whatnot. But truly, Alaina, what are realistic expectations for Dalton Kincaid?
That I think he'll play a lot and be good, but like I think that it's not, which is like,
is that your bold prediction?
Really bold on you guys. But I do think we've seen in the past the Bills obviously slow with bringing rookies in. That's not a surprise. So I don't think if it's like not an aggressive amount of Dalton Kincaid early, like that should be surprising. But I think he's gonna a really big part of this offense. They drafted him in the first round for a reason. He's had a great camp. Everyone's saying how he doesn't even seem like he's a rookie, which is something you want to hear about your first round pick. So to me, I think he's going to have a really big role. I think he's going to play a key part in this offense. I just wouldn't be surprised if it's like, okay, let's bring him in. Let's like make sure we're not throwing too much at him right away.
Sal, does he have to have a big role because he's a first round pick? And that's been a talking point.
He has to have a big role because of what they've been missing and why they went out to get him, right? I mean, this is traditionally a position that does not translate really quickly in the NFL. The Bills know that, yet they still moved up 2 spots and took him in the first round. I think Brandon Beane said it right. He basically said he's Cole Beasley, but in a much bigger body, right? That's what they're going to be expecting from him. I think you have to. If you're going to do this for this team, this isn't a team that's rebuilding. This is a team that they targeted this player for this specific role to try and win this year. He better have a big year, and I think he will. And I think it's very smart what they're doing, which is, hey, 11.5 personnel. They're not going to ask him to put his hand on the ground and go block defensive ends left and right. They're going to give him a little bit of that as he goes. Right now it's get in the slot, stand up, go be there, turn around for Josh Allen, and be ready. And by the way, I think he's going to have a major impact right away. Like I look at the Jets matchup, for example. Jets have good linebackers. They're not cover linebackers. I think this is a matchup. You say, we're going to just attack you with our new weapon and see if you can figure it out. And we're looking Monday night at going, ooh, okay, this is why they got Dalton Kincaid. I think that happens right away.
What about, Matt, this idea and thought that Dalton Kincaid needs to succeed and succeed right away, especially on the heels of you got into it. Kaiir Elam was the exact same scenario. They identified him, they moved up, they picked him. He never saw the field, and a year later he's still a talking point because of his lack of playing time and his place on the depth chart. How valuable for Brandon Beane? Not that he's going to go anywhere, but just for maybe the perception of fans and stuff, is it that the Dalton Kincaid hits because of what's even been talked with the Boogie Basham and certainly the way Kaiir is going?
Yeah, I think it's 2 different situations because at corner for Kaiir, like there's so much on his plate to be able to start as a cornerback in the NFL against some of the passing offenses that they'll face. Whereas Dalton Kincaid in this situation could really be the 3rd option, 4th option in this offense, and they could ask him to just really lean into one part of the game, which is just getting open and catching the ball, which is what he's good at. Like, who knows? Like, they might not even ask him to block very much. Although I will add, one play in particular, it was the James Cook touchdown run.
Nice block.
He had a nice block there, but he kind of got a little bit overwhelmed at the end of it, but he held up long enough, and he did his job. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of those moments where it doesn't look perfect, but he could go out there and execute what they're asking him to do. which I think is a little bit different. There's just been more, like he's also leaning into what he did well in college, whereas Kaiir Elam is flipping completely in what they're asking him to do in the pros compared to what he did at college. His specialty is like Sean McDermott's never going to really ask his corners to do that, in little fits here and there. So I don't think it's a perfect apples to apples comparison, but I also think Kincaid, he seems so fluent as a route runner and as a decision maker in terms of his routes. That's very rare in rookies. Tight ends, wide receivers, like how much did we talk a couple years ago about DK Metcalf and the fact that, all right, he's just winning on his pure athleticism because he doesn't really have a very extensive route tree. Whereas I think Kincaid, they're going to trust him to run a lot of these option routes that it took Cole Beasley years to develop that chemistry with Josh Allen. We'll see where it materializes, but it seems like they have a lot of trust at the start in him, and he's earned it to this point. Now we'll see when the football actually matters.
The one thing with the Kincaid conversation comparatively to other recent draft picks is this. They're not asking him, as you guys said, they're not asking him to do something and turn into a player immediately that he's not suited to be right now. He's not suited to be a 3-down tight end and be in line and block. Then they're not asking him to do that, and that's why I think the results to start are good. Kaiir Elam, they're asking him to be a zone corner when he's a press man. They draft A.J. Epinesa, who's a power rusher, and tell him to completely change his body and turn into more of a speed combo guy. Is it maybe the team understanding, let's draft guys and let them be who they are, as opposed to relying on their coaching and their strength and conditioning and turning them into things? Do you think we're pivoting? Do you think they learn from maybe some of these, I don't want to necessarily use the word mistake, but past experiences? Or is this simply a one-off of, we needed a slot guy, we needed the middle of the field, and we have the ability because of Dawson Knox to do that? Alaina, what do you think?
I actually think who came to mind when you were talking about that was Dorian Williams, because they easily could have forced him into that Mike role. They could have said, we really need a middle linebacker now. Tyrell Dodson's not working out. Terrell Bernard's injured. Let's get him back into that Mike role. Instead, they've left him where, like, talking to draft analysts, like, they thought he was better in, like, the more Matt Milano type role, kind of not in that Mike spot. But instead, they're leaving him there, and, like, they're going to let him back up Matt Milano. And I think, like, that to me is a good example of, like, the Dalton Kincaid thing, where it's like, you know what, he can do this, and we're not going to, like your point, you're not going to make him go out there and block. We have Dawson, he can block, and we've got other guys that can do that. So, yeah, I think it's a different kind of move where it's like, no, these guys are good at this, and yeah, we need a Mike linebacker now, and we can talk about the Dorian Williams pick because of that another time, but, like, yeah, I think there is more of like he's good at this, and we'll let him do this, and that works well in a way because we don't have to get into Kaiir more now, but, like, it's not working. So, like, I think there is a sort of an adjustment with this draft class but then this class has a lot of potential, I think. Like, I think it could work well.
Do you think they learned, or do you think this is just circumstance?
I think they're learning, and I think that Kincaid, his role and them going and drafting him might be a direct correlation to what Sean was talking about late in the season last year, where he's just getting to a point in his career where he's understanding that the game has changed, and you have to rely on rookies now more than you ever have before. And and what also is kind of like a side storyline that we're going to start to cover over the next year or two is, how do all of these draft hits and misses affect the relationship between the coaching staff and the executive team? Because that, to me, has been what has allowed them to find so much success, the synergy between Bean's staff and Sean's staff. The more misses or mistakes that you have where you don't set a player up to have success, whether it be drafting somebody that the coaches didn't want, or, the coach is not coaching the player up to the way that the evaluators saw when they drafted him. Those things have to link up, I think, a little bit more so than I think the pressure should be on Brandon Beane as a drafter. I think they need a more cohesive plan for players, and I think Kincaid's a great place to start.
I think, though, that it's tougher for a team that's already well built and has this infrastructure in place to go and just let them be who they are and go on the field. They're not going to play. Like, you got to fit in a little bit into what you're trying to do. like, you're not rebuilding. Hey, this is where we are. Sure, we can work with them a little bit, but, there's already guys there. So, yes, 100%. Like, that's the best kind of teaching and coaching is, adapting to your personnel, adapting to who you are, to the people you have around you. But, I mean, I just think that even though they've had these misses, a lot of this talk lately, especially since Boogie's been traded, is a bit overblown. I mean, they also had 2 guys from this draft class get picked up on waivers. You know why? Because other teams said, those are good players. They can't make the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are a good team. Luke Tenuta last year got picked up on waivers. Rashad Wildgoose last year got picked up on waivers. These are guys that it's been the second-round picks. There's no doubt about that. They also look like, you said this class, Osiris Torrance looks like a great second-round pick right now. I just don't think – I went back and looked. Because he has a Super Bowl, it sounds crazy to say, I get it, or 2 Super Bowls. I think Brett Veach has the same kind of hit-and-miss rate as Brandon Beane. Where's Mecole Hardman? He's with the Jets. Where's Clyde Edwards-Helaire? A first-round pick that's been a waste, basically. It's the same thing no matter who you look at in the NFL to me.
And I think what you just mentioned with Tenuta, I think Beane deserves a plus for turning Tenuta into Vandemark.
Right.
Pivoting off of that.
Exactly.
And
right.
now you have a viable piece. Tenuta, I don't even know if he made that team. And if he did, I read some beat reporters that were really low on him in the preseason. So, listen, I think that there's some value or some criticism that has been slung at the Bills for the draft over the years. I think some of it's been warranted, especially on the defensive line. But I think they have demonstrated going back to early in Josh Allen's career, pivoting off of the big wide receivers, going to more of the smaller wide receivers, and reimagining things around these players. They've shown enough of that over the years where I think Beane and his staff deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Let's get into defense. Alaina touched on it. Middle linebacker, and Alaina, I'll let you start there because you dipped your toe into the water a little bit. How concerning is the status of the middle linebacker spot?
Extremely. They made it very clear they wanted this figured out. I mean, I think they've had it kind of figured out for a little bit, but they wanted this figured out and settled and done and dusted a long time ago. So the fact that we're sitting here and, they haven't actually named a starting middle linebacker, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a concern. They kind of trusted that they had a guy in this group that would do enough. Brandon Beane said that they don't have a Hall of Famer in this group, which obviously that would be a really big deal if they did. But they don't have a guy here that is going to flash and maybe be the next Matt Milano even. But I mean, I think it'll be Terrell Bernard. I think that's where we're moving. But
by Monday, you think, or is that a little too early?
I think Monday.
Wow.
I
like it.
Maybe that's my bold prediction.
I like it. No, because I do think it's going to be Terrell Bernard too,
Yeah.
Alaina, but I wonder, he hasn't had any, he didn't play in the preseason at all, but it's not like he has to learn a new defense. He knows it, right?
Right.
I wonder who trots out there Monday, though.
I think it's Kirksey over Dotson, but I am leaning Bernard. I think
no
if they
way.
Kirksey start Monday Night Football?
This
over,
week?
over Tyrell Dotson.
I don't think there's
I
any
don't
way
agree
he
with
could get
that.
that up to speed. There's no way.
I don't agree with that.
He'd have to come in and learn this defense and know how to
And that's
set
my
people.
bold prediction.
Okay.
There we have it.
I
I
love
love
You
it.
think that this week?
Yeah, he's played in the defense
no,
before.
I don't agree with that.
He's played in the defense before. He's playing out there with Micah and Jordan.
He's played in
Micah-
what defense before?
He's played in a version of this defense before, and
He's not played in a version of Sean McDermott's
here's something that's more important than sure. First of all, I think Kirksey could call the defense better than either of those other 2 guys, even without knowing it. Just in generalities, that's been.
But you have to know it to call it.
You do have to know it to call it, but I just think from a execution perspective, in coverage against these tight ends, against some of these slot receivers, I don't know, man. Terrell Bernard coming off of the hamstring, Tyrell Dotson, based on what we saw in the preseason. You're right. Monday might be too soon, but man, there's a short leash.
Let me ask you
for
this.
both those guys.
Christian Kirksey gets released by the Houston Texans. This guy who had 120-something tackles, right? Why did 31 other teams say we don't want to give you a contract? I mean,
That's a good question.
right? I mean, he's on a practice squad.
Mhm.
I want to go to Buffalo to win. Everybody does. If you had a 53-man spot, I'm sure he would take that over going to the Buffalo Bills practice squad.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's way too much to expect. His name, to me, is much bigger than probably what he brings talent-wise at this point of his career, at least what it appears. Now, maybe he comes to Buffalo and he's just, oh, my gosh, wow, resurrection of him playing with Micah Hyde. I don't know.
Sal, the one thing that I think we're not talking about, though, is what we've seen from the two guys ahead of him. Bernard was bad last year. Dotson has been bad.
Wait. Bernard was bad where?
Last year in his one start, he was bad.
Yeah, he
Where
played,
did-
he
where
played
did
well,
he
though.
start?
He played well.
But I'm just saying, his only NFL experience, it hasn't looked good. And they're going against Aaron Rodgers and an potentially high-end passing offense.
Yeah, but this
on
is
Monday
the
Night
bet
Football.
that they made for themselves. This
Right.
is where we are. This is the linebacker group they brought in. I don't think Christian Kirk sees in a spot to play week 1 against Aaron Rodgers. And they said they knew this linebacker room. They knew it was Tyrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard. They have to be comfortable with these being the options. How Tyrell Dodson plays on a football field is not surprising at this point. They've seen him for years in this role. This is who he is. So to me, it's... Yeah, I mean, that's what they're going to do, though. They're going to trot out these guys against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets offense and hope for the best.
My thing is this. You said it. This is the bet they made. I don't anticipate there's really any transactions they could make between now and during the season to find a fourth option or whatever it may be. How big of a deal and how big of an impact is it going to be on this defense overall that these are one of these three has to be their starting middle linebacker?
Well, the middle linebacker is not, even though it's the captain of the defense, the middle of the defense, it's not like quarterback. You can insulate the middle linebacker. You have guys in front of you, guys behind you. Micah Hyde, there's such a veteran defense. Matt Milano standing next to you. You know, there's going to be mistakes made. They're not as rangy or as athletic as, Tremaine Edmonds. And I think, by the way, for all the fans who down Tremaine Edmonds, now you see what happens when you don't have Tremaine Edmonds, who obviously made an impact for this defense. I think it's going to hurt them at times. I don't think these guys are bums. I just don't. I think they're guys who are probably about average starting middle linebackers in the NFL. You look around, the difference is on this team, average just hasn't been good enough because they've been so good. At the end of the day, actions of Sean McDermott saying and telling us all the time how much, even though he said he'd be willing to have someone else wear the green dot, the calling of the defense is an extremely important part of who they put at middle linebacker.
Let's push this ahead on the defense. And the pass rush, I would say, is maybe the next biggest topic that the defense has coming into the season. Let's discuss it, Alaina, without Von Miller. And do you have the confidence, simply with the addition of Leonard Floyd, that it can produce better than it did at the end of last year in the absence of Von Miller?
Yes, I think so. It is a very similar group to last year. Like, you're right. Like, Leonard Floyd's the only, on the outside, the only addition that we're talking about. I think this interior defensive line is so good that, like, Poona Ford, I thought, was a great addition. Like, I think they did a lot of, like, the interior of the defensive line to me is the strongest position on this, like, position group, I guess, because it play different spots, but like, that's the strongest area on this roster, and I think that can help the pass rush so much that, like, I think they'll be okay. I think Leonard Floyd was a great addition. I think he can really play a big role. I also think that Greg Rousseau needs to be even better. Like, obviously he needs to play better, but he needs to really take that jump this year.
Matt, what are your expectations for Von Miller upon his return? Alaina said it. 34 years old, coming off a second knee injury. What is realistic and reasonable to think that he can provide at this stage of his career whenever he does return?
There's definitely some questions about him returning to the form that he was at last year. I'm also not going to doubt him. The dude is like, he's a different level of human being. Like, obviously, like, the way that he trains, like, his mental is, like, we joke about it when we talk to him, but, like, the dude never has a bad day. Like, it's unbelievable to watch him walk around the facility and the energy that he brings. Like, I think just that, like, getting him back in that room is going to mean a lot for them. But to me, I think one of the most important pieces to their season is Greg Rousseau. Like, that might be a little hyperbolic, but he needs to become, like, a 10-plus sack guy, to her point, to your point, to Alaina's point. And I think it has a potential to start in a big way. Mekhi Becton's getting trotted out there at right tackle on Monday night. To me, and I know this isn't a Jets preview show, that is a advantage Bills if you're Greg Rousseau in year 3 against Mekhi Becton. I want to see him kind of, like, get after Aaron Rodgers. And that offensive line as a whole shouldn't give this deep Bills defensive line, on the interior especially, many problems.
I promised I'd get you guys out around an hour, so I'm going to push us ahead, Sal. Last little topic on defense. Jordan Poyer was banged up all of last year, surprisingly came back. Micah Hyde coming off a neck injury. They're both in their early 30s, coming off injury-stricken seasons here. Is there any potential that age is going to catch up with these two all-pro safeties that have been so instrumental and critical to the inner workings and success of this defense since 2017?
Well, the old saying is the one opponent can never beat his father time, unless you're Tom Brady, of course, right? But, I mean, that's really – it's going to happen at some point. But I'm still confident enough in their training, their athleticism, the way they work off each other. Will there be a play or two this year where we go, man, 3 years ago maybe they break that pass up. Maybe they're a little bit step faster. I think so. But overall, I still think these two guys together, really 1 + 1 = 3 for these guys. That's how much better they make the defense. So, yes, I think there can be concern. I think it's the injury concern more than anything. Like, can these guys both hold up, which is where Taylor Rapp comes in. Look, I mean, we saw what happened when they had to play DeMar Hamlin and Cam Lewis and other players a lot at safety last year. Teams just took advantage of that. And I just don't see that happening with those two out there. To me, it is about the injuries, making sure they're healthy. And one way you can do that is take more off their plate as a game goes on. Like, okay, maybe there's a series where the Bills are up a couple scores. Taylor Rapp comes in and plays a little bit. These guys have played so much football. Maybe that's a way to make sure that you just really keep them for the marathon, not the sprint.
All right. To keep in line with keeping on time, Alaina, I know you love going first when I do bold predictions. And so we're going to start there with you.
Oh, God.
Give us a bold prediction for the Bills 2023 season.
Why did I have to go first? I think okay. I think I'll go with the I think Christian Benford. Can I go very specific?
Yes.
We'll play
I love it.
We'll play and start many games and do so very well. And that I think he and Dane Jackson, I see them both having opportunities in starting, but I think there's been a lot of confidence in Christian Benford as of late, and I wouldn't be surprised that if by the end of the season he's kind of earned that role.
We will go to the bold prediction champion, Matt Parrino, who said he's picked a specific tight end that was not Dalton Kincaid, but he did say the Bills would go tight end in the first round. When we did our...
I think if you roll back the tape, I said like Darnell Washington, but I wasn't leaning just into
Dalton
that.
Kincaid is not like Darnell Washington.
No, I'm saying they could go
Okay,
but the point was tight end.
Yes, I was giving you credit. Shut
Yeah,
your
but you
yapper.
did it in a
Okay.
you had to kind of
All right.
Backhanded compliment.
All right, Parrino.
I'm outta here.
What's your bold prediction for the regular season or the season as a whole?
the season as a whole. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that because I would have gone.
All right, Jimmy
Neutron.
Neutron,
Just say it.
fire away.
I think the Bills are going to the Super Bowl.
Oh,
Have you?
That's
I
not
like this. Let
bold.
me ask you a question. Did you?
Yeah, it is.
Have you picked them
I don't think so.
at all the last 2 years to go to the Super Bowl? Have you picked them the last 2 years at all?
No.
I like it because here's the thing.
That's not bold.
Wait a minute. I've picked them 2 years in a row to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and I promised last year in my preview that if they didn't last year, I would not do it this year. So I can't. I'm not allowed. So thank you for doing it because I'm not allowed to do it. But I love it. From you, I like that.
You're welcome. I didn't do it for you, but I'm glad that it makes you feel happy.
I know you didn't.
Here's the thing on it. So, a couple things with this. Number one, I truly believe in team sports being battle tested, going through like bad losses builds character and the ability to perform when you get in hard circumstances again. I don't think any team will ever go through a season like the Bills went through last year. And so I think they're deeper on both sides of the ball. I think they have a more focused Josh Allen, as he said himself. And I think that prioritizing keeping him healthy, as long as he is healthy throughout the season, this AFC is going to beat each other up. And I just think, like, I'm not betting on I like the Dolphins almost a little bit better than I like the Kansas City Chiefs this year.
No.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
All right, you
that
get
should have been
one
your
at a
But here's the
time.
problem. But here's the problem. I don't know if Tua can make it through the whole season. Like, that to me is like, if you told me Tua plays 17 games and then plays in the playoffs, I think I'm power ranking the Bills and then the Dolphins too in the AFC. And
Where
I know
are
that's
the
not
Bengals?
All right, you
probably 3 or
you
4.
get one bold prediction.
Sorry,
here,
I'm just-
buddy. Save some for Sal. All right, Sal, who do you got? What do you got?
My bold prediction is not only will Dalton Kincaid be on the all-rookie team, I think he gets votes for Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't know if he's going to
Wow.
win it because Bijan Robinson looks like he's going to get the ball a lot. But look at these quarterbacks who are starting. I see him being a better vote at the end of the day than Anthony Richardson or C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. Who else you got? Jordan Addison, Jahmyr
probably.
Gibbs. There are guys. I think Dalton Kincaid's impact will be so much on this offense, he will be in the Rookie of the Year conversation.
Bold all around here. I will save mine for my show later.
I like
in
that
the
tight end energy. Sal.
Yeah,
Atta
baby.
boy, baby.
Oh, no.
All right. This has been an awesome, once again, gathering of the minds here for a Bills season preview podcast. My thanks once again to ESPN's Alaina Getzenberg, Syracuse.com, Matt Parrino, and WGR 550's Sal Capaccio. Kevin and I will be back for your regularly scheduled programming to really dive into the Jets later on this week. But for now, thanks for listening to the Buffalo End Zone podcast.